It's getting bad. Early into his pro career, Joyce was showing huge promise, stopping the likes of Daniel Dubois, Joseph Parker, and more, but has since fallen pretty badly. So this is the destructive downfall of Joe the Juggernaut Joyce.
So Joyce did turn pro pretty late. He did have an extensive amateur career and won some medals and fought some big name guys like Anthony Joshua. He also fought Alexander Usyk, and he did beat his upcoming opponent on April 5th. He's returning against Filip Hrgovic. He was supposed to fight Dillian Whyte. That fight ended up falling through, and now he's getting back on short notice against Filip Hrgovic, which we'll get into soon. But like I said, Joyce did turn pro pretty late, but he was putting on devastating performances. He beat a young Daniel Dubois in 2020, making him stop via a pretty bad orbital fracture, then stopped Carlos Takam, then stopped Christian Hammer. He was on a roll, and he even beat Joseph Parker via knockout, which now we know how good of a run the likes of Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker are on right now in Riyadh season, just a couple years later after Joyce stopped them. So where did it all go wrong for Joyce? The answer is pretty simple. It was in those two big fights against Big Bang Zhang, who put him away for the first time and finally cracked that iron chin to Joyce, which is pretty much what he became known for before getting cracked by Zhang. He was taking licks, he was taking shots of big power punchers and walking through them, walking forward. No one was able to hurt him until his chin finally did get cracked, and he's never been the same since.
Yeah, Joyce, so famous for just being able to take as big of a punch as humanly possible, fully living up to the name Juggernaut and bringing it back, fairly flat-footed, but when this guy would put together punches and especially land with accuracy, man, it was devastating. But yeah, like you're saying, against Zhang, he finally got found out. Zhang officially won that first fight via stoppage due to Joyce suffering some damage to his eye, and the ringside doctor officially stopped that fight. So that was officially his first loss on his career. Going into the rematch, it was going to be a wonder to see if Joyce was going to be able to do stuff differently and be able to avenge his first loss of his career. But there we saw Zhang double up fully, and coming into the rematch, many were hoping that Joyce would be able to put something differently together, and he actually weighed in 35 pounds heavier for that fight. Joyce is already a big boy and a guy that is already quite flat-footed and relies on his power and taking shots, and going into that fight, it just did not help him at all. Even with the additional weight, he got cracked, his chin got cracked. This was pretty much the fight that put Zhang on the map. And honestly, Joyce has never been the same since. He is quite old now, 39 years old. So for Joyce, I think those two fights pretty much put a stop to all of his momentum and, to be honest, his career. Counting him out of any serious title contention or even fighting any of the top elites of the elites, such as Usyk or AJ or anyone really of that sort. But then from there, he did go on to get a comeback win against Cash Ali, in which he stopped Ali, but that wasn't really too good of a win, to be honest, but just, I guess, a tune-up fight in that sense.
Yeah, it seemed like he was going to go on this run in his 30s, but obviously, like you just said, he's 39 years old. Now, it's pretty much going to be pretty impossible to make a run back to the title. He came back, he had a tune-up fight against Cash Ali, stopped him with a big right hand, and then actually took up a big fight against Derek Chisora. What was supposed to be the return of Joyce, Derek Chisora has had a very mixed career, especially as of late. Win some, losing some. And losing to Chisora, who's kind of been the gatekeeper for all these years, kind of just was that icing on top of the downfall of Joyce, really not being the same. Chisora himself is not a young guy, he's 41 years old, and for Joyce to get dropped and then kind of outclassed as Chisora was just coming forward, making it rough, making it dirty, and just outboxing Joyce to a smooth decision, I feel like Joyce really doesn't have much in the tank. He's a massive guy at 6'6", weighing in around 280 pounds in recent fights, so he still has that power, he could still be a threat, he still does have a decent chin, but I just don't see any way he gets back to the top, and I feel like this fight against Hrgovic could just be that final nail in the coffin, that final fight that really cements Joe Joyce as not being able to crack through the top of the heavyweight division. He does have a 93% knockout ratio. He was knocking out quite literally almost everyone besides one opponent that he beat. So when he does win, it's in devastating fashion, but when he does lose, it is kind of in devastating fashion as well. And that's what we've been seeing more of recently in his career, at least in the last 3 years. It's kind of been a bizarre up and down career for Joe Joyce. At one point it looks like he has the greatest chin in the world, and at one point it looks like he has the weakest and getting dropped and knocked out and just not being able to make it work again. So it's really going to be hard to climb the ranks once again, especially at the age that he is, at the point he is in his career. He is going to want to have these fun fights like the Dillian Whites, I guess like the Filip Hrgovic's who he's about to fight, and he did beat in the amateurs. So maybe having been in there with Hrgovic, having known his style a little bit, having beaten him back in the day, that could play an impact on this fight. But I don't know, personally I feel like Hrgovic still does have a little bit more and is probably favored decently in this fight.
Yeah, Hrgovic won't be any pushover to say the least. He did lose his last fight against Daniel Dubois, but this has been Dubois' ascension, and he's definitely been improving much, especially since when he fought Joe Joyce. And as well, Hrgovic has beat Zhang in the past, and of course, boxing math doesn't add up. And as well, that was a controversial decision with Zhang dropping Hrgovic in round 1 of their fight. But regardless, styles do make fights, and this is still not going to be an easy fight for Joe Joyce probably. Hrgovic is only 32. He's probably got some gas in the tank still. But this is his kind of last chance to maybe potentially make a small run. I still think it's probably too late for Joe Joyce at this point, being 2-3 in his last 5 fights against some solid competition, but it's not like he's fighting any complete world beaters or anything of that sort. So it's honestly hard to say what's really next for Joe Joyce. I don't know if his title hopes are really going to be in the picture anymore. Like you said, I think the most realistic bet is to put on some fun fights, some enjoyable fights where he can make a nice payday to end off his career. Like you said, against Dillian White, that fight got cancelled. They could for sure rebook that. 2 big British heavyweight boxers. People would tune in for that fight 100%, especially because Joe Joyce is such an exciting fighter. You know, when you watch him, you're most likely going to see a knockout, regardless of whether it's his opponent or for him. And at the end of the day, this is the heavyweight division. If a fighter who's older is going to make a run for the title, it is in this division. Coming up in his career, Joe Joyce was compared to George Foreman. Of course, this is when he was still undefeated, still knocking out up-and-comers like Daniel Dubois. So he had a ton of hype, a ton of excitement, especially with that British scene, that UK scene. People were hyping him up to be the next big heavyweight. Unfortunately, that's not how his career played out, but we'll have to see what he's able to do against Hrgovic, and I guess what is next for his career.
Yeah, a couple years ago, he was saying in interviews he has the bone density tested that was 5 times that of a normal human. This chin of Joe Joyce was reportedly unbreakable. Nobody could hurt him. Nobody could crack it. And when it finally did crack against Zhang, that was kind of a huge shock to the boxing world. Everyone was talking about how he was hitting his prime at 37 years old. He was going to make a run at the title. He had a lot of potential. He had a lot of the attributes, the size, the volume, the relentless attack with good punch selection and a titanium chin, at least what we thought at the time. But as time goes on, we've seen the weaknesses in Joyce's game. He does eat a lot of punches, which is never good. Being known for having a good chin doesn't always end well, because at the end of the day, that means you're taking a lot of punishment. That means you're taking big shots. But who knows, Joe Joyce might just come back and put on a statement, show that he still does have some left in the tank. But let us know your thoughts in the comments down below on the downfall thus far of Joe Joyce's career. But if you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out the video on screen on what is next for Alexander Usyk.